Welcome to Witch Talks, the series for spiritual seekers, witches, and enlightened souls. I'm Hannah the Suburban Witch, professional tarot reader, astrologer, and witch, and I hope you're ready to get up close and personal with your favourite witches. Hello, my lovely listeners. I'm going to apologise in advance for the audio quality of this section right now, not our actual recording part, because I'm off enjoying myself in Melbourne on a little family interstate holiday, and I totally forgot that I record a start and ending to my episodes, and I didn't bring my microphone because I'm not taking that on the plane. I already brought teacups for my tea leaf reading class. That was enough. So here we are. This is me saying hello to you all. Just a reminder that you can access the replay to my tarot class for this month only, so the month of August 2023 only, on my shop. And a little sneaky heads up that next month, which is September, I will be re-releasing my course, The Art of Psychic Divination. This is new and improved. It's a whole new method of taking the course. There is extra bonuses. There is all sorts of good stuff in there. So if you have been wanting to learn from me, if you've been wanting to learn how to access your psychic abilities and develop them and learn 15, 20, I don't even know how many, I should go through and count how many different types of divination we actually cover. But there's absolutely going to be something in there to tickle your fancy. You can sign up for the waitlist on my website, as those are the people who are going to be hearing about it first. In this episode, I am chatting with Marshall, Witch of the Southern Light, an expert in the cunning arts. Marshall is a co-host on Southern Bramble, a podcast of Crooked Ways, and the author of his new book, Cunning Words. You may also know of him through his TikTok and social media, which he creates in this incredible array of witchy content that just the aesthetic is perfection. Seriously, every video is just pleasing and delightfully witchy to all of my senses. It's wonderful. I'm so looking forward to chatting with Marshall and sharing his work and his wisdom with you all today. So let's jump into it. He is joining us all the way from Texas via Zoom today. Hey, Marshall, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here because I've been a little bit of a long time listener. So the fact that I get to join in is really fun.
I didn't know you were a listener.
Oh yeah, I love. I mean, I was inspired by witchy podcasts to create a witchy podcast. So I listened to so many different ones, and some of them are more favorite than others. And I really love the way that you bring people on and introduce people and practices and ideas from all around the world. I think it's really cool.
Now I'm gushing. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you. Awesome. Cool. That's a surprise. Well, since you're a listener, you'll probably know I like to pull a tarot card for my guests, at least this season. Are you open to that?
I am.
Now, I'm going to actually this is almost like divine timing, I would say. One of my followers sent me this week. They were like, look, I have these decks. I'm not using them, but I think they're going to be great for you. I'm going to send them to you. They arrived within like 12 hours they were here. I was like, what witchcraft is this?
Wow.
I got here and I opened it up, and it was a deck that I still haven't even used this one yet. But this is the Hocus Pocus deck.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I haven't had this. I've had my eyes on it, and I was like, oh my gosh, now I have it. And I was like,
Oh, I
this is kind of
love
perfect.
it.
So I'm going to use this one today. Do you have
That's
this
funny,
one?
actually. I don't. But a few years ago, I think it was 2014. Me and my friends, this is before Hocus Pocus 2 was coming out, before like all the costumes were big. We decided to go as the three witches for Halloween one year to our big Halloween block party in drag. It was so amazing. We won the entire city costume contest.
That
I was
sounds
Winnie.
that sounds phenomenal. Oh my god! And of course you were.
I'll send you a picture.
I would love that. I would love that. Okay, all right. So I'm gonna give it a little shuffle. I'm gonna do like a little. Feels weird doing an unboxing of a deck that's already been opened, but I've had a few people already say, please do it on YouTube. So I will.
Oh yeah, wrap a ribbon around it.
Yes.
Untie it slowly.
All right, because I had a lot to say about the Disney villains deck. So I'd
Oh
be
yeah.
interested to see how this one goes. Which I like the Disney villains. I just think I could have done it better. All right, now do you have a question? Do you have a question in mind?
I do. I would like to know if there are any words of wisdom I could take in the process of writing my next book.
All right, all right. My little, if no one's watching the YouTube, my little shocked face of, yay, there's another book. All right, let's have a little look. So, any words of wisdom for creating it or to include in?
To create it.
Create it. Okay. Words of wisdom.
Advice, wisdom.
Let's see what comes up. All right. So, first things first. Since I just got this deck yesterday, we have 4 of pumpkins. What are pumpkins? Are they cups? Let's have a look at the guidebook.
I know. Let's get the guidebook.
All right. So, understanding your deck. That doesn't tell me much there. Major arcana. We don't want those. We want pumpkins are
they pentacles, maybe?
I have a feeling suit of pumpkin. It doesn't tell me.
Oh, how cute.
Well, the king of pumpkins is a gracious and industrious man. Business and endeavor. So maybe it is pentacles. Oh my gosh.
I just went with round shape.
Yeah, that's a good way.
Discs.
Does it say in here? Oh my gosh. I'll have to
I bet you is there like a potions for cups? If not, what a waste.
Yeah, I agree. There is. I'm surprised they don't say it. There is potions. Potions is cups. You are correct.
Knew it. I knew it. I told you.
Yep. And then lightning has got to be air, right? It's got to be swords. And pumpkins must be. Yep. And then candles is fire. Okay. So.
Oh, perfect.
All right. That helps. Because we don't get a lot either. The image is 4 pumpkins that have been carved with different things in them. One has stars, one has bats, one has cats in a crescent moon. So obviously the whole deck's going to be kind of Halloween spooky themed. But 4 of pumpkins, which is going to be our 4 of pentacles. All right, 4 of pentacles. All right. So 4 of pentacles. Usually this is a card of what I say, protecting our energy. Okay, protecting our main points of energy. So the words protection sort of come in there a little bit, and making sure that what's coming through is potentially you let a little bit out, but not all of it, if that makes sense. So there's almost like protecting yourself and the areas where you are most sensitive and most vulnerable. Okay, so it feels like a little bit of a reining in. That whole energy of that card, which we see in the Rider-Waite-Smith, there's a man with a crown on his head. We can presume he's a king, and he's holding a pentacle over his heart, under his feet, and I think there's one over his head as well from memory. So the crown chakra, basically heart chakra, and under the feet, which is an energy point that connects us into the earth as well. So with all of that, protecting yourself a little bit, and I'm getting that as well with these pumpkins. We have a little bit of the light shining through, but they're not wide open, right? So they are... Yes. You're letting it out, you're letting a little bit out, but there's still some of it staying here. So it's almost like keeping some for yourself. Okay. And as someone who is a fellow writer, I know there is so much that we put into our writing and so much of ourselves. So I think this is telling you, this is your advice and guidance, is to keep some back for you. Okay. So keep a little bit private, a little bit protected. Then we also have the 10 of lightning, which we can see there's just like lightning coming out of the hand. So this would be like 10 of swords energy, right? This is that like final death stroke, which is very intense.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what I love about that 10 of swords energy, okay? If anyone ever looks at the Rider-Waite-Smith, it's my favorite deck just because it is so rich with symbolism. The man that's lying dead on the beach has his hands in a symbol of benediction, which is a blessing. Well, it's the same hand like gesture that we see in the Hierophant as well. And whenever I see that, especially where the Hierophant does it, it tells me a little bit of a wait. It's a little bit of a pause. And with the 10 of swords energy, we see this new dawn rising. Now, in this image from the Hocus Pocus deck, we still do have like this rising light coming from the bottom up. And we know, especially because we've seen number 2, it's not really the end, right? So that's the vibe that I'm getting with this energy, is there's the slight slowing energy, like a little bit of a pause. So maybe don't rush into it, or don't rush to publish immediately, or wait a little bit, like just a little bit of a wait energy, and there will be more to come. Okay, there is more coming. So that's for you as well. So maybe this even holding back is holding back for a number three book, potentially. All right. So potentially looking at that sort of aspect of it. It's very practical and mental energy coming through for you. How does all that feel?
Oh, I think you definitely hit some intense nails on the head. Uh very, very resonating with that. In fact, I hesitate to say too much because I feel like that's one part of the purpose of what you
Mm-hmm.
literally just said. Um, but two, now that's really interesting because I have been somewhat struggling with a couple aspects of it, and I wasn't sure exactly where to go or where I wanted to put my focus and again, being very vague here in certain parts. So this, I feel like this definitely gives me some really, really wise words of wisdom. Thank you.
Awesome. You are very welcome. And for everyone listening, when I do my tarot readings for guests as well, one thing you might notice, the more specific the question, the more
Mhm.
specific the answer. So when we have people, they're like, I don't know, just pull a card. Sometimes it can be more difficult because it's not as directed. And I find that when people come to me for a reading as well, and it doesn't really happen anymore, but back in the day it used to, especially when I was learning and doing readings for literally everyone that would ask. When people come in, they're like, I don't know, just tell me what it says, or just pull whatever. It is a more vague reading as opposed to when they're like, no, I actually need to know X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z. It's like the whole energy shifts, right? The whole energy
Mhm.
is different. So that's just a little side note into that. Now, let's start chatting about what we wanted to talk about. So, I do want to talk about your book, but
Mhm.
I also want to make sure that if anyone hasn't come across you before and doesn't know who it is that you are you able to let us in a little bit in terms of how you got to become the fabulous witch that you are and sort of what led you to this point?
Sure. Yeah. I, at this point in time, identify as kind of like a folkloric and traditional witch. I'm in my mid 30s now. I've been through a really weird, quite a crooked path into the craft. I want to say I was probably like 12 years old when I first found my first book of witchcraft. And of course, it was the 90s. It was Buckland's Big Blue Book. It's like it's the tale as old as time, truly. And at least when it comes to the witchcraft community. And it was very it was extremely impactful for me at the time. I was going through a lot of really intense changes that I didn't understand. I wasn't out yet. I didn't even know that I was gay yet. So it was one of those things where I felt like I was extremely at a loss of personal power and identity and not really understanding. That's kind of a hard feeling to put to words. I felt like I was marginalized before understanding what that meant yet, because it seemed like, and I'm sure many other gay people out there will resonate with this, it seems like everyone else knew before I did. And almost to the point where I had to kind of counterbalance it, fight back against it. It wasn't until I was probably in high school and they were just like, gay. And I'd be like, yeah. And, and it was funny because that was also part of taking my personal power back, interestingly enough. If um it's weird being in Texas to have that experience of being a witch and being gay, and which one of them is actually the one that ostracizes me more, if you will, so it's one of those kind of funny things where um it helped me find a place of personal power and sovereignty when I felt extremely lost. I was not really getting what I wanted from the church. I grew up Episcopalian. I have a very mixed family of religion in the past, so it was really just about me and my mom. My dad was kind of atheist. It goes into a lot more different directions. So there was no pressure on me to stay Christian outside of me and my mom. And she was very, very, very open at certain points, and she was kind enough to let me experiment and grow. And eventually, I came out. I continued to practice all through high school and my 20s. I kind of took a really long break and got back into spirituality in my 30s again. And that was when I discovered when you take that level of a break and you're not exposed to that information that in your face all the time, when you come back to it after almost a decade, the things that had changed, the exposure, it was so amazing. When I found like videos on TikTok, when I found people doing full pages of publishing, they posted pictures of their Book of Shadows. You have to understand, growing up with those original 90s books, like you did, nobody saw that. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
should know. Even like, and I'm totally dating myself here. Like I had Teen Witch by Silver Ravenwolf, like even in there, as an author, she talked about being fired from more than one job by letting it
Mm.
slip of what her religious beliefs were. So it was a very different experience. And I actually got in trouble at school for being a witch. Like it was one of those weird things, like they didn't know how to handle. Like you can't really be punished for this, but people are gossiping and it's making them uncomfortable, and you need to stop it, Marshall.
Mm.
That was my first freezer spell, by the way.
Oh, my very first spell that I ever did was a freezer spell, and like
It's a
first,
great beginner spell.
oh, it is such a good beginner spell, and
It's such a good beginner
I
spell.
put a video up on TikTok ages ago, and it went pretty viral in terms of doing a freezer spell. I
Mhm.
just used that, that clip. It was, oh no, this is showing my TikTok age. It was
Show
like,
it.
who in the hell put the muffins in the freezer? That one? I don't think that's what it was. And so I just like used it and was like, I put the muffins and I'm showing like me putting a piece of paper in the freezer. I thought it
Oh
was a
yeah.
funny, quirky, witchy take on a trend, right? It went
Hmm.
off. And this girl like got into the comments and then dedicated her whole page to me and how wrong I was and how terrible this was and how dangerous this spell was and how irresponsible to share it. And I was like, this is literally like it's the simplest. It's just you put a piece of paper in the freezer, and
Hmm.
it's the first spell I did. I've done it a million times. Like, what's wrong with, like, not what's wrong with you, but just who hurt you?
Hmm. You know, I have a spell in my old grimoire. Um, and it was, can we swear on this? I'm not
Yeah, go
sure.
for it.
Okay. It's called I Shit on Your Life. And that's the curse. It's a little hex, just a little I shit on your life hex. And someone said something nasty in one of my comments once, or something about like, um, oh, your book is pretty, but your handwriting is super shitty. And I just was like, shitty, shitty, shitty. And the next I took, it's like a little piece of it's my toe is wiggling as I'm sitting on the toilet, like on my potty, and then like a little square toilet paper with their handle written on it, and then the flush,
Mm-hmm,
the toilet
mm-hmm.
flushing, and then me finishing with like shitty and showing the page and the actual book itself. And it was literally like no more than
I
probably
love
like a
that.
15 to 20-second thing. And it went viral. And I thought it was so funny because no, I didn't actually do anything, but it was like, what? You literally came into my comments.
Mm-hmm.
You dedicated time from an extremely anonymous profile
It's
to
always the
say
way,
that
isn't
I
it?
have, right, to say that I have shitty handwriting. You know what? I have time to waste too. I have
I
time to
love it.
waste too.
I love it. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
I'm a little petty online. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I can't help myself sometimes. I'm like, if you're
Pettiness
gonna
with humor, I feel like is the best.
like, I know you were there last week on Twitter. There was this person commenting around some very not great stuff. I'm pretty sure you blocked
Mm.
them immediately, and I was like, you are a bigger person than I, because
Oh,
I did
yes,
not. Yes.
yes. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, okay.
Because they put this thing on, they were very defensive about their
Hmm.
like spiritual bypassing and very what I consider to be services steeped in racism and anti-Semitism. So I'm like, no,
Hmm.
I'm just gonna have to jump in here. And
She was giving me starseed energy.
yes, absolutely. And there was this full comment of, whatever it is, I am right, you are wrong, you all think I'm lying, blah blah blah. And I just took the exact words that they said and replicated them in a reply comment, and they didn't even pick up that it was literally what they'd said that I was saying back to them. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, that's so funny, and you're so angry at the thing that you just said.
Hmm. Isn't
That's
it amazing
my
how that
online pettiness.
happens? It's
Mm-hmm.
like mirror,
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It was literally just a mirrored comment.
mirror. Get mad at yourself, girl.
Yes. Yes, I
Aging,
digress.
I will admit, maturing for me has involved writing out a lot of response tweets, comments, and then deleting them and walking away. That's what
It's so
maturing has
hard
looked
to
like for
do.
me. No, it's so hard to do, but it's been worth it. I I should say, so since coming back into all this,
Hmm.
starting to create social media, it's been really, really amazing. I've loved doing it. I never intended to grow a following. I never intended to do this thing that became like a online content creator. Like I never intended to do that, but it became so fun. I really enjoyed it. It was a great opportunity to share my own experiences and and I had this is one of the things that I noticed when getting into content creating and specifically just getting into the online world of witchcraft. There are so many people with really intense opinions. And I think an intense opinion is great when it's informed by fact or experience. Um, Unfortunately, what I found is with such limited characters or time, especially depending on which platform you're talking on, a lot of black and white things become so severe. You can't do this no matter what, on any circumstance, or this is always okay under any circumstance. Or I felt like there were so many things that went from trying to uh, stop misinformation or correct misinformation to getting into a little bit more policing others to all the way into directly being like, I am now making content because I know it enrages people and
Mm,
it gets interaction. I'm making content that I know is hot and spicy because it creates controversy and algorithms thrive on controversy.
they
As I've
love
learned,
it.
they love it. And I feel like it did it, but one point a while back go so deep into the opposite direction that we're no longer being helpful about the nuances of information. And let's be honest, witchcraft lives in the gray. We have to be open to discussing the nuances of every subject. Yes, there will be some hard yeses and nos on things, but we got to discuss these topics. I think it's a great discussion to talk about the fact that freezer spells sometimes are considered baneful, sometimes they're considered binding, sometimes they're considered benefic. It depends on your experience. It
Hmm.
depends on how you categorize it. And
Yeah.
having that discussion was what I wanted to really bring to my content. So it's been really, really exciting kind of getting into that and building and working with a wider community. And that's, of course, what led me to finding traditional witchcraft. A couple really wonderful books that informed my practice are Gemma Gary's Traditional Witchcraft, A Book of Cornish Ways, The Black Toad, and Devil's Dozen. I love Treading the Mill by Nigel G. Pearson, and oh my gosh, uh, uh, The Crooked Path by Keldon, which is a great, if you're looking to just get some information on traditional witchcraft, Keldon's book, A Crooked Path, is a fantastic like introduction. It's going to give you all of the bases so you feel like you get a good foundation and then you grow from there. It's super, super wonderful. And then I also love Folk Witchcraft by Roger J. Horn. He's been a wonderful, wonderful inspiration for me.
Roger J. Horn, did he write What We Do in the Night? What we do? What?
No, he wrote 13 Brooms at Midnight
Okay,
and The Witch's Devil.
The Witches Do. Who am I thinking of? What We Do in the Night?
Sounds like an
Not
80s
What We Do in
synth
the
song.
Shadows. That's the that's the TV series. Book. Google. Do your thing. What We Knew in the Night. That
Ah,
that is by because I've read that one. I haven't. That's Raven Gramassi. What am I thinking of?
it's an
Um,
R. It's an R word. I gotcha.
oh gosh. Anyways, no, I haven't actually
Mhm.
read anything by Robert Horn. Then I don't think.
I think I would recommend folk witchcraft to almost
Hmm.
any, literally, if you are have never read a book on witchcraft before and you just want a little introductory into the idea of folklore and folk informed witchcraft, I would definitely say Folk Witchcraft by Roger J. Horn and The Crooked
Hmm.
Path by Keldon. Both of those have been instrumental into setting foundations that I then built my practice up from.
Hmm. I love that. All right. So, do I have?
Mhm.
I'm just going to double check if I have other questions because I really want to jump straight into your book.
Let's do it.
Good. Okay. Oh, I have one listener question before we do.
Okay.
I have a listener question.
I love them.
This came in from one of my Patreon supporters, Kelly, and they've said, "What are your secrets to being so fabulous?"
Where do I start? Okay. Um, Funny enough, I actually feel that's really kind for you to say. Thank you so much for saying that in the first place. I will say right now, I don't always feel fabulous. So the internet is a beautiful thing because I am such an introvert. right off the bat, if people don't know me, I am an introvert. I like being a homebody. I like not being around big groups of people. I get very overstimulated easily. And so I get to choose the best time that I feel offering myself to the internet. And usually when I do so, I love to do it fabulously. So one of the biggest things that I think really all of us should really consider doing if we want to live a fabulous life is think about how we ration our energy. What is our social battery like? Everyone's going to have a different one. Some people thrive in groups, some people thrive being alone or maybe just one on one. I love a dinner party or a game night over a club night. That is how I find myself really feeling my best and giving my best to the situation that I'm in. Finding that place and recognizing that it is okay to have FOMO. It's okay to be like, oh, my friends are having fun, but I really want to be at home right now. It's okay to I personally will actually set my social battery at the beginning of the day so I know how to ration it out throughout. I knew we were recording this tonight after work today. So I actually mentally prepared how I was going to expend my energy. I have a hard time people asking me things last minute
Mhm.
because I didn't prepare for it. And I'm sure that that wasn't the expected answer to the question for being fabulous. But I think when it comes to social battery, a lot of us um, don't always give ourselves enough self-love. I think a lot of times we think like treat yourself looks like pedicures, manicures, and massages. But sometimes it means allowing yourself to turn your brain off. It
Mm.
means allowing yourself to get enough sleep when you know, if you're privileged enough to be able to. It means sometimes just allowing yourself to have that pizza and not feel bad. Like for me, that's a big one. I need to feel happy and have that level of social battery saved up and rationed. And then
Mhm.
that's how I feel I honestly live my most fabulous life.
I love that. Can I just say, I picked my outfit specifically because we were chatting today, and I'm wearing, not that you can see it because it's under the table, but it's the idea, right? I'm wearing my long black skirt because it makes me think of you.
Oh, thank
And
you.
in your book, every time, obviously, you're depicted with this beautiful long, I mean, it's a trailing black skirt. I don't have a
Oh, of
trailing one,
course.
but it's there. The vibe is there.
I do. I do think a good skirt makes anyone fabulous. I don't care what your gender is. A gorgeous
Absolutely.
flowing skirt that makes you feel like you could fly. I feel like if a skirt makes you feel like you could fly, it's over for everyone else.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go into your book. So you sent me a PDF copy, so I've been able to devour that and have, as I told you, I've since gone and purchased it. So I was like, I actually have to have this physically in my hands in
Oh,
my
thank you.
library to have on hand because I loved, first of all, this book was not like other books in the craft. And I love that. It feels like it felt like I stumbled across a book of old fairy tales. That's what I've like. This is, I don't know, the Brothers Grimm from way back when, and no one has found this one yet. Like, that's what it felt like. And I was reading
Oh,
through it, and the joy on my face when I got, so for everyone listening, that the first, it's the first half of the book, or the first
it's
two
broken up
thirds.
in three parts. I
Mm.
mean, the first third is definitely probably the thickest part, and
Mhm.
that's the one that has the 13
The stories,
stories.
yeah. So
Mhm.
all of those stories, so it's got stories at the start, and then spell work and spells at the end as well. But they
Mhm.
all weave in. But my joy when I got through a couple of those stories and started to see the links back in the other stories, and was like,
Mhm.
oh wait, that's that character. Oh, that's that one. Oh, it was just, it was wonderful. There was so much thought. I could see the thought behind it. I could see the planning behind it. I could feel these like interwoven threads that were bringing it all together like a tapestry.
Mhm.
It was beautiful. I loved it. And for me, when I teach witchcraft, one of the things I find that works the best is storytelling. Stories are how we, like, you don't remember all the list of correspondence that that person gave you, but you remember the story that they said
Mhm.
about it, right? How they used this and why they used that and what was happening and how they were feeling. That's what we as humans remember. That's why we have these oral traditions of storytelling and parables and things like that, because we retain information that way. So to see this done in this aspect, amazing. Where, like, obviously, where did this come from? I think creativity comes from spirit myself, but What inspired your idea to create such a unique book like this?
Well, first off, thank you so much for saying that. I feel like you really described the feeling I wanted to put in this tome, in this grimoire. And actually, I feel like that's probably the best place to start. Grimoires are what inspired this. The idea of a mixture of grimoires and kind of like the folklore and bardic tradition of spreading information through song, through story, through rhyme. Um, I was very, very inspired by this idea that grimoires we've had from old, trying to wrap my mind around how I want to put this. Grimoires we've had from old, we've had for centuries. We've had, the Testaments of Solomon, we've had the Black Pullet, we've had for so many of these really fascinating stories. And I think we forget that a lot of these different grimoires actually came in stories. A lot of different mythology and paganism that we even think of now in modern day came from stories, mythology. I mean, it's not just, going to the temple of Aphrodite, going to the temple of Zeus, going to the temple of Minerva. It's not like you just go to these temples and those are these gods and deities. They have stories, they have parents, they have children, they have love interests and adventures, they have things that shape who they are, what they represent, what their virtues are. And all of these things came together in my mind to inspire me to write something that was inspired by something old, but that kind of brought a new tale to deliver it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I mentioned before Gemma Gary's book, The Black Toad, and that one was a really big inspiration for me because she wrote this book, and it's a collection of West Country, so Devon and Cornwall witchcraft or folk magic. She wrote it in an organizational tool that comes in three parts. And those three parts are Old Mother Red Cap, Old Mother Green Cap, and Old Mother Black Cap. And it's a way of organizing the type of magic or charms that she was sharing from literally her home. And it was such a cool organizational tool to deliver this, one that was all about charms and spells, one that was all about plants and herbal curatives, and one that was all about hexes and curses and binding. And I felt like there was so much more than just the chapter. I felt like there was a story there. There's a spirit, there's a person, and I wanted to explore who that person was. I wanted to explore where they came from. What were their experiences? What made this image, this title, Old Mother Redcap, represent spells charms? What made Old Mother Greencap represent plants, trees, and healing curatives from herbs? And I kind of just wanted to explore what that would be like. I didn't know I was going to be writing a book yet. And I didn't quite yet know when I started that these stories were going to interweave and wind together. That was actually quite a unfurling of events as I was writing. And I started realizing I just really wanted to give you a small piece of cosmology that it didn't have to come from some ancient source. It doesn't have to be some long hidden tome. I don't have to pretend that some, random person from another country gave it to me and I transcribed it. Like, I wanted to give you the honest truth of what this was and where it was coming from. It's coming from something that was inspired by old, but it is new, and it delivers new pieces of magic, new
Mm.
ideas, things that I were inspired by my own landscape, by my own experience. I love that you mentioned you may not remember all the correspondences, but you might remember the story. And there's a tale in here called the Seven Holy Siblings,
Mhm.
and it's inspired by. I mean, I don't know a lot of modern witches who are like, yeah, I've read the three books of occult philosophy by Cornelius Agrippa.
Mhm.
But if you look in there, you see that he has, in the first chapter, really gotten into planetary magic. He breaks down the seals of the planets, he breaks down the virtues of the planets, the days that correspond with them, and a lot of different types of charts and seals and symbols. And I wanted to kind of take it into a folk method. I wanted to create a little bit of a parable, and I was able to create this parable of seven holy siblings: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. What who they were. It's a small little one. It just describes this is Sibling Sunday. This is
Would
the
you
temple.
would you be open to reading it on the
Yes. Oh,
podcast?
sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. Hold on. I love that you asked because I think it's a really cool. And we don't have to read the whole thing. It's
Well, it's a good one to share, and it shows sort of, I guess, what I'm talking about
yes.
in terms of how you can and how I don't know, just how the magic comes through. And when you were saying that, they're not old stories, they're new, but all
Mhm.
the old stories were once new, right?
And you
They
know
were
what?
new sometime.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I thought of before is a lot of people have this idea that things that are ancient are things that are more valid.
Yeah.
Things that have been around a long time and they're older, those are more legitimate. And I'm like, everything was someone's UPG once.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was someone's individual personal spirit communication at one point.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that this is my singularity. This is my first point.
Yeah. No, I love it.
So this is the tale of the seven holy siblings. There once were seven holy siblings, and the first was called Sunday. He was devoted to the sun and worshipped at the solar temple. He was a strong and powerful protector and had the gift of healing illnesses of the body. He always smiled, bringing happiness to all who sought him. His dwelling was covered in sunflowers, marigolds, and dandelions. The second sibling was called Monday, and she was devoted to the moon. She resided at the temple Luna by the sea adorned in moonflower. She was a water priestess and the keeper of dreams. She was known for her gifts of intuition, foresight, and empathy. It was a great oracle, and people came for miles to seek divinatory services, water, and moon magic. The third sibling was called Tuesday and was devoted to Mars. He held court at the Martian temple and armory. He was a great and virile defender. His gifts of brute force and strength made him the champion of the people, and he led armies into victorious battles. With him on your side, no challenge would be too great to be accomplished. The fourth sibling was named Wednesday, and they served the temple of Mercury, adorned by dandelions and lavender. They were the head organizer and messenger of the siblings, having the gift of encouraging or calming discourse. They were a keeper of memories and thoughts and a great philosopher. They were a wonderful public speaker, and people would travel to the temple to seek guidance from Wednesday in matters of travel, business, and new opportunities. Should I do the whole thing or just
Go for it. Yes.
okay, let's go. The fifth sibling went by the name Thursday and was the head of the Golden Temple of Jupiter. He was the most loyal sibling, a great leader and advisor in financial and legal matters. People came to him for gifts of wealth, prosperity, and improvements in familial and social standing. Supported by his sibling Mercury, he was known to aid in thriving business opportunities for success and gain. The sixth sibling was named Friday, and she was the most beautiful. She devoted herself to the temple Venus and kept a harem of lovers around her. She was a great poet and supporter of the arts. People came to her to find romance and aid them in marriage and fertility. She gladly bestowed gifts of beauty, love, and friendship to all those who sought her Venusian temple. The seventh and final sibling was called Saturday. He stood guardian at the Black Temple of Saturn and was known to be stoic and nocturnal. He was a great magician who trafficked with spirits and was known as the keeper of curses and bindings. Surrounded by nightshades and thorn trees, his temple was only saw the bravest and most determined of visitors. They brought gifts of farm goods and once a year called upon him to bless their crops with sacrificial blood. There once were seven holy siblings, and now you know them all: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. They stand sentinel of their temples, and every 7 days each in turn reigns supreme, bringing you their presents and gifts all week long. All you have to do is ask.
I just love it. I just love it. And that is a small parable, and it's slightly different to the rest of the stories that you've included.
Yes, because it doesn't necessarily give a tale with a
Mm-hmm.
point other than to help you learn a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more and to personify. And personally, so I'm an animist.
Same.
You get it, you get this.
Yeah.
I see spirit in everything. My book is a spirit.
Mm.
The characters are spirits. So when I talk about sibling Sunday, sibling Wednesday, you'll notice some of them are gendered, some of them are not. That's because they actually represent the energy, or specifically spirits can't be gendered. So first off, let me just say that right there. But I'm talking about the actual connection to the planets that they're part of, the history and folklore and mythology behind the days of the week that connect to their planets. So it's very important to include the fact that obviously Wednesday is androgynous.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about understanding these is you see it in the tiniest detail. Um, One of the coolest things I remind myself on a regular basis about Wednesday and Mercury being androgynous is that literally it's in the center of the week. You can see 3 days before and you can see 3 days after. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool thing to remember and remind ourselves is when it comes to these spirits we're working with, we're not just calling upon a planet, we're not calling upon a necessary star alignment. We're calling upon these spirits. They exist and they exist so much more in a larger form and understanding than we really can really dwindle down into our human minds, but they do. And I tried to put it in a way that people could take in and kind of feel closer to.
I just love the way it's done, and each of those has its own sigil or what
Yes.
would you just say
It's
sigil? Or it's a
well, the planetary seals that directly
seal.
correspond, yeah, the seal that corresponds to the three books of occult philosophy.
Mhm.
And these seals were actually drawn on their number chimeas. So it's when you get into the math and it gets further away from the stories, and I'm like, let's do the stories.
Yeah. No, I love that. So you can see just by hearing that, and I'm sure
Mhm,
all of our listeners would agree, you'd be listening and going, oh, wealth and prosperity. Oh, okay. Well, maybe that's the day that I do this spell. Like it's just a way for you to understand
mhm,
those correspondences. And you can build an altar to each of these spirits using what you've heard in the
mhm.
parable, right? So I think
And
that's
and
wonderful.
what's really cool is so that's the story, and then you go to the back and you have literally the last chapter is the talismans of the seven holy
Hmm.
siblings. So
Hmm.
you get there and it tells you how to take the story that you just learned and then create a talisman. So if you wanted to, let's say, okay, so you wanted to work with Jupiter and Spirit and Sibling Thursday for prosperity. So you would reference back to the grimoire in the back, and then you would create the thing it tells you to create, and then you would say this 4 times because the number 4 corresponds with that with Jupiter, and you say, "Oh, holy Thursday, I call upon your temple of Jupiter. I evoke your power, your virtue, your celestial force. Fulfill my petition. O gainful giant of abundance and success, a loyal leader, most decorated and honored, so prosperous in hearth and home, under the might of Jupiter, imbue this talisman with the spirit of my desire made real and true." And each one of the planets and specifically days of the week will have a invocation, or sorry, an evocation you're calling out to them to fulfill your petition.
It's I love the interwovenness and the practicality that you've got within the book. I think it's wonderful.
Practicality matters.
Yes. And another
Mhm.
thing which you've already touched on, but I really wanted to bring up was
Please.
the uh, gender diversity in your
Yes.
characters.
Hmm.
It stood out in a way that was, I don't want to say stood out as in like, obviously it's intentional, but
Hmm.
not in a detracting way that I think a lot of people presume it's done in that manner. Do you know what
You
I
know,
mean?
I do. And I think it's very, very true. I do sometimes think that maybe things are put in stories as more so like a look what I did
Mhm.
versus a this is just how it is.
Yeah,
I think you can
it
tell a really big difference.
it felt natural. It didn't
Mhm.
feel forced. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm feeling into the energy of the situation, but I really appreciated it. And I think it's so needed. And I can just see, I feel there's so much power in these stories. I can see them being told time and time again, passed down. I can see them really influencing people's craft and the way that they bring in more correspondences like, oh, I'm going to bring in green or I'm going to wear green because it correlates with, and I'm going to do this because of that. And I can just see
Mhm.
it getting bigger than you'd ever imagined, if that makes sense.
I
And
hope
that
so.
and that these stories, there's a trans character, there is
Mhm.
a non-binary character, that just becomes normal part of storytelling, which is how it should be, I think. And if we
Mhm.
look at fairy tales of old and what they've turned into now, can you imagine these? Like, can you?
And
That
and
makes me excited.
that's actually why, because I never had any. I never
Mhm.
had any queer fairy tales growing up. I never had any Disney movies where the prince got the prince. I
Yep.
never got those stories, and I felt like I really wanted to create stories that told my story, that told
Mhm.
our queer stories. There is a really important story you mentioned about with a trans person's experience. I felt it was so, so, so important to include certain parts of what it means to live in the modern day as a queer person and not make it to where that's the point of the story, just that
Mm,
that happens in the story, because that's the point of our lives, is to be queer, but it happens to us anyways. And we're part of the society. And unfortunately, we come across people who disagree with the fact that we should.
mm,
And you come across a lot of very specific parallels in my book to what I have experienced in life, and what we as a community are experiencing. There's a moment where someone doesn't like a very specific queer relationship and say we have to protect the children.
hmm.
We
I
don't want
picked
we don't
up
want
on
the
that.
children seeing you, and it really
Mm,
connects to what we're living through right now. I
hmm.
wrote a book. I wrote a story about the three wise healers, and if you read the author's notes, which we should talk with the author's notes, but
Yes, I was gonna.
yes, definitely. Um, that was the charm was already written before I wrote the story, but I knew there
Mm,
was a deeper story, and I didn't know exactly where it was yet till I found myself in the situation where we had a massive outbreak of monkeypox last year, and
mm,
my friends were catching it right and left. They were locked up in their homes for sometimes 1 to 2 weeks. We didn't know how long this would last. I mean, it really became stigmatic. It was very, very full of stigma, and
mm,
it was we were watching the way that our government, not only nationally but specifically in Texas, was handling it, and we heard the language of these conservative politicians. It was just the gays. It's just the gays. And then when we kept telling them it's not going to be just the gays, it's literally a touch pox. And then children started getting it. Instead of being like, oh no, my gosh, you're absolutely right, it is by touch. Instead, they went, how did a kid get it if it's a gay disease? And I'm like, how can I be living in 2022 at the time with this happening? And
mm,
we were we were desperate. And my friend was on his 10th day in his apartment with monkeypox, and he reached out and asked if there's anything I could do. And I said, I'll do anything that I can. And I did the three wise healers spell, and I made a charm for him. And I gave it to him, and he texted me 2 days later. The pox started to scab up and fall off, and he finally his fever was completely gone. His muscle ache was gone second day.
mm,
And I'm not sitting here saying that, oh my gosh, I did that, but I am saying that I believe that my charm contributed to it, and
mm.
I believe that was the inspiration for the direction the story ended up going with the experience of the pox.
Yeah, and I love, as you said, there's story and there's reasons behind everything that's in this
Hmm.
book, and you can feel it in the stories. But then also you have these, as you said, author's notes
Yeah.
that punctuate. By the way, this one was written because of X, Y, and Z, or by the
Hmm.
way, I'm not saying this is my experience. However, you give that nuance that lacks in most other books. And I think the reason you were able to do that is because you've self-published. You got to have a say in
Hmm.
exactly how it came out, because the formula that we see through publishing companies, they don't allow for that a lot of the time.
Yeah, there were definitely a few reasons I chose to self-publish. I love a lot of these wonderful publishing companies. I think that they're doing some of them are doing wonderful work.
Mm-hmm.
I am a control freak, and I really wanted this book to be exactly what I put out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was grateful for the freedom and opportunity to do so. And the author's notes, I'm not sure if they would have made it in big
I don't
publishing,
think
but
I don't think they
yeah.
would have, just for with all my publishing experience.
Yeah. Well, I feel like a lot of big publishers want the author to remove themselves from the work they're putting in there.
Mm,
And I can't do that because it comes from me and
mm,
and my experience and my thoughts. Um, I really, really wanted to make sure that when you read this story, you also got to understand how it came to be, what was inspired by it. The yellow bird story was inspired by Tituba from Salem,
mm.
and the story of, I mean, the song of the cicada is inspired by my experience in Texas.
Yes,
The
thank you
story,
for bringing
yes,
up the cicadas.
yes, and the crepe myrtle. The crepe myrtle is the same way. That's the tree that literally lines my sidewalks my whole
Yeah.
life.
So I have a special relationship with crepe myrtles, because when as most of my listeners know, I did do some work over in the States 10 years ago, 11 years ago, something like that now. And I worked on a farm in Louisiana.
Mhm.
in very rural Louisiana, and they had this beautiful big crepe myrtle, and I'd never seen one, like I'd never noticed one before. I'd
They're
never taken
beautiful.
notice. They're gorgeous, but I remember every time we sat under it, we got eaten by mosquitoes. But we'd sit under it because it was so shady and so beautiful. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
this is a really nice big old tree. And then when I went back to the States, when gosh, I was pregnant, so 2016, I think, went back to the States. And that was when my husband proposed to me underneath a crepe myrtle tree. And it was just like this really beautiful, and that was again in Louisiana at the
That is so
Myrtle.
fitting for this story. Oh my
I know.
gosh.
And it was at the Myrtles plantation, right? Which
Mhm.
this beautiful old home, plantation home, and he did it there because it's meant to be haunted. And I have a love of ghosts. So we had the ghosts as our witnesses to him proposing. So there's beautiful oak trees, there's Spanish moss, which is like, oh, you can't really see it. There is Spanish moss hanging behind me, just there.
Ah, there it is.
Because I love it. I don't know, something about it just warms my heart. This crazy thing that just like hangs off everything willy-nilly. I love it. It's like it looks like bits of thread. I love it. So
Right? It's like a cat just like got a hold of a string
yes,
that's larger than the world and went, here you go.
it looks like it's
That's my
just
next story.
been
That's the
decorated,
next
right?
story. The
It's just,
history of Spanish moss and the
yeah.
mythology behind it.
It's just, been thrown around a little. I love it. It's just wacky and out there. So that there's the crepe myrtles, and yeah, the love aspect as well, which you've got in
Mhm.
that story. So I loved that aspect. Of course, I tried to grow my own down in Victoria, where it's kind of cold, a few years back, and my father-in-law mowed over it before it had a chance to
Oh
do anything. I went
no.
out and I was like, what happened to our love tree? What happened to it? Because it did. It signified our. Well, I was like, this signifies our relationship, and then he mowed it down. I was like, oh no, what does that mean? It's all fine. It's all fine.
At
But
least he doesn't practice sympathetic magic.
thank God. Thank God. No, he's just an Aries that's just meow. So that was quite funny. But you mentioned cicadas in another
Hmm.
story as well. And I love that because there are cicadas here in Australia as well.
Hmm.
And they're so noisy and cacophonous. And the whole story, like, I have so many memories of picking up a cicada shell.
Oh yeah.
It gets kind of stuck to you. They're really sticky.
My dad used to come up behind me when I was a small child and he'd put them on my shoulder and then he'd
Yep.
come around and be like, Marshall, what is that? And I'd be
Yep.
like freaking out and he'd just be there laughing.
Do we have the same dad?
I think we might. We might.
So yes, that sort of a thing, or like putting them on people. That was kind of it
Yes.
was funny. And I was like, oh, I can just imagine you putting it on the tree, and it was one of those stories and those ideas that you've put in there that just inspires. And I love books that inspire my imagination and the creativity that comes with witchcraft. That's one of my favorite parts about it. So
Mhm.
yes, would you be open to sharing what you said to do with cicadas?
Yes, absolutely. It's a poem that I wrote that talks about understanding. You know what? I probably should just read it.
Go for it.
Would that be okay?
It's your book.
Right? I know, right? I should. I literally have all the rights too.
I guarantee that everyone listening is not like, oh, I don't want to know the amazing stuff that you're right. Like I can guarantee
Right.
they would be like, why did you not read it out? Hannah, can you get him back on to read it
I
out?
should have. I should have. Well, here we go. It was a personal poem for me because I was taking a lot of walks back during quarantine. And one of the things I started noticing throughout the summer was all the little cicada like shells. And I started the exoskeletons that have shed, I started collecting them. I think they're magical. That's a whole nother witchy thing. But
Mhm.
anyways, this is called The Song of the Cicada. Song of the deafening cicada, sing to me your southern wiles. Song of the cacophonous cicada, sing to me of your earthly trials. From the ground do you crawl, from grub to winged beast, from larva beneath the darkened earth to treetops to make a musical feast. From tree to tree and shrub to bush, winged creature, strike your chords. Liminal being of above and below, sing the aria of the Crossrodian lords. Your fallen comrade here I bury amongst the roots of this fine tree. Respectfully cloaked in my desire, cicada sing out, your soul now free. I offer the sap of the maple tree, in a bargain struck here and now. Wings do flitter, rattles sing out, seeds of the spell do plow. From here to there and there to yonder, the ballad of the South they sing. Carry out my will and make it true, my desire now real from song and wing. Southern force, hear my call, sing out loud and clear. Melodic spirit of my landscape, cast out my desire, bring it here. And that itself is the spell. It's
Mm.
teaching you not only how to do it, but it is the words. It's an invocation. It's an evocation. You are saying an offering to the spirits of the cicada. They are the music of my landscape.
Mm.
So this time of year, as they are like chirping outside, it is such an intense music to me that I really, really felt inspired to work with it on a magical level as a spirit. So the concept would be you find a deceased cicada, one that has passed away. They have a kind of a short lifespan. Um, Save its carcass, not the shell, the actual cicada with like the wings and all. Um, you write down a reasonable desire, and I do say that quite a lot throughout the book. Reasonable desire. We're not asking for the lotto, okay?
Mhm.
You write it on paper and wrap it around the cicada's body, as in respectfully cloaked in my desire. That's what that refers back to. Then you bury it in the roots of an old and tall tree where other cicadas dwell, because the important part is that you're giving it back to its community. You're also going to pour maple syrup as an offering, as cicadas actually are known to drink and eat the sap out of trees. That's why they crawl up them. Um, as the cicadas croak for their lost sibling, they'll take your offering and sing out as the song travels. It will set in motion the reality of your desire.
I love that. And especially because for me, sound is such a big thing about it, putting it out to the universe,
Mhm.
to the spirits, making it known what I speak. So I create that whole abracadabra idea, right?
Absolutely. I love that.
And it's just like, let's times that by probably 1,000 cicadas in this tree and make them all croak it out as well. And
Mhm.
they're so loud, right? That I just think
It's
it's so creative.
networking.
It is networking. It's very mercurial, isn't
Yeah.
it? I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So I think you can tell you've researched, you know, cicadas have the syrup of the sap of the tree. Like, you know, that you've woven it in. The people reading it don't need to know that aspect, but they're learning it anyway.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
know what? I do hope that my book inspires people to research more, because I am someone that loves to watch a period drama about someone real and be like, was that real? And then I'll look them up
Yeah.
online. I would love for people to be inspired by things they read and then want to go research more about that subject,
Yeah.
about that theme, about that situation, whatever it may be. I hope it inspires you to build upon and not just feel like that's it. I think
Mhm.
not everyone's going to have cicadas,
Well, you
but
can totally adapt it, right? You find either
absolutely.
crickets.
Crickets,
Crickets are very
grasshoppers.
noisy. Yes, we
Mhm.
have rainbow lorikeets here, and
Tell me more.
they're like a little parrot style bird, and they are very noisy and they swarm in with hundreds of them. We have these two gum trees right outside the window that I look through from my study, and at sunset, they swarm in this huge flock of them and they just chitter chatter to each other very noisily,
Hmm.
deafening noise. Like, I love the sound of birds, but this is like, okay, you're pushing it, guys. It's only certain times of the year when the tree is flowering, but they'll do it at sunrise as well, which is not as
Hmm.
great because it comes up pretty early here in the summertime and wakes me and my toddler and everyone up, and it's fun. But that I can imagine, let's say you find either a bird that's been killed or passed away because
Hmm.
there are cats around here, they shouldn't be outside. But if you found the carcass of one of these birds, you could bury
Hmm.
it with respect and dignity under one of the trees that you see them with. It's using what you have and what is
Hmm.
super noisy, right? Just look for the noisy animals in your area.
Hmm.
You could, I mean, a lot of people complain how noisy possums are here. We have very cute possums. They're not like your possums over there. These ones are
Oh,
like
sweet.
little
Y'all
adorable.
have all the good marsupials.
Yes, they're so cute. Because when I went to the States and they're like, oh, this is a possum, I was like, what is that?
I know. Yeah, it doesn't look the same here. They look like feral cats.
No, ours are smaller and that sort of thing, but they can be noisy if they fight
Hmm.
or on your roof and things like that. Just whatever people find noisy, you could
Hmm.
adapt this, right? Um, I just think it's wonderful.
And a huge part of the lesson of that poem is understanding that part of animism, part of witchcraft is spirit contracts.
Mm.
Understanding that I think a lot of us think of spirit contracts as like this, it always goes back to the whole like sold my soul to the devil
Yeah, I
aspect.
signed
It
my
goes
name in blood and
exactly. It really feels very nefarious. That's very Hollywood.
Mhm.
That's very witch trials, which is super cute. But that's not always what spirit contracts means. Almost every spell that I do is some sort of spirit contract. I am offering you something as the spirit I'm working with. Can you help me by giving this back to me?
Mhm.
Every single time you do a spell candle and you put intention oil around it and then put herbs around it, you're working with the spirit of fire and you're working with the spirits of those herbs, the very specific virtues those herbs carry. That is what they have to offer you. I'm going to
Mhm.
offer it incense. I'm going to offer it a prayer or an evocation. I'm making an offer with this stuff for you to
Mhm.
give me this stuff.
Yeah.
It's very, very base level when you think about it like that. But
Yeah.
that's what we're doing on an animistic and spiritual level.
Before we
It's not,
before we even started this, I went around with my dried rosemary that I lit and offered as an offering to my deities. I've got one on one table there with a candle for healing as well behind me. There's Thoth behind me here. So offering Thoth, and I also promised to do some writing today. And my ancestors as well, because that offering of smoke, and I'll go through on Saturday, I'll go through and charge up my protections around the house with smoke as well. It's that offering,
mhm.
it's feeding. I see it as like feeding my spirits and keeping that connection strong, right? I give you
Yes.
this, and it just keeps a connection. It's not like a, by the way, can I have X, Y, and Z?
It's so funny you say that. I have a very specific, I call it a prayer. It's a very specific thing that I say every single day. I can say it. I've memorized it. I
Mm-hmm.
try to offer incense when I can as an extra offering.
Yeah.
But if I can keep that connection going every single day by saying this like 16 line rhyme that I have put together and written
Mm-hmm.
as a devotion to the spirits that I have made contracts with, I've made
Mm.
agreements with, we're always staying in contact. I'm not asking for things every day. In fact, I
Yeah.
actually rarely ask for things. But when I
Mm.
do, that relationship is extremely already tipped in my favor because I've put
Yes.
in the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And I think it just keeps them present as well
Yes.
in a way, which, for me, especially my ancestors, I want to keep them present and know that they're remembered and that they're
Hmm.
special to me. And, part of an offering to them is to read. I wrote a book of I wrote my grandmother's memoir with her whilst she was still alive, and had that printed and gifted it to her for her 80th. And part of my, I guess, devotion to my ancestors is I read those stories to my children and I show them those photos, and it's keeping that memory alive. And
Hmm.
I think it's really beautiful. And then every now and then I notice, there's a specific bird that I know is from my grandmother when I see it, and I'm like, oh, she's bringing me a message. What is that message today? And I know that she'll be there for me when I need it because we've got
Hmm.
that connection still strong, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's lovely. I think the way probably why your book resonated so much is it feels very similar to how I do magic. So probably saw myself a lot in your words without taking
I'm
away
glad. I hope more
yourself in them.
people, yeah, no, I hope more people do. You'll notice a lot of the characters don't have names.
Mm-hmm.
Only a few characters have names, and the point is not to know their name. It's actually to know their experience.
Mm.
Um, the point of a lot of these tales are not um, uh, to be a work of fiction. They're meant to impart information and to give you a experience to have along the way of receiving it. So, like in First Flight, there are no names used whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, some of them don't even have faces. Like literally, that's a part of the story in the first place, which connects back to the fact that during witch trials, there were a lot of, but during confessions, they would say like, "Oh, there were other people there, but their faces were shrouded." It's a tiny detail, and you know what? Someone may not go off and research that, but someone maybe who has known that information or read, say, "The Witch's Sabbath" by Kelvin, you might know some
Mm.
of that little bits of history and information that actually went to just inform that little detail.
I
And
love
if you
that.
don't, then it's okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of the research type people.
I'm such a researcher.
Yes. Like when I tried to read Outlander, I
Uh-huh.
got so annoyed because I got up to, I don't know, she goes to get her wedding dress and she chooses a white one. And I was like, white was not a wedding dress thing back then. What? when did the wedding dress come out as white? I'm looking up and it was the Queen Mary, one of the queens, but it was not when Outlander was done. I got really annoyed that that was not researched, that they just presumed, oh, white was what wedding dresses were. No, it was just your best dress until maybe it was Queen Victoria, one of the queens. One of the queens brought it in. I can't remember. My English history is not that great.
I'm pretty sure it was Victoria
Maybe it
because I
was
think,
Victoria.
yeah, yeah,
Anyways,
maybe.
anyways, she
Maybe.
wore it and
Anyways,
that made it like the fashion and then it just grew from there. But it was not
right.
back when Outlander was set, and that annoyed me because I am the research type to go, hang on a minute,
Mhm.
let me check that. I went down on a deep dive this like ages ago and I couldn't keep reading the book. I had to put it down.
Oh wow, got in the way.
It
It should have
got
been
in the
blue anyways.
way. Yeah, but anyway, I watched the show. The show was very good. I might go back to the book one day, but I think my type of neurodivergence, I get in the way of myself enjoying
I
things
do too.
sometimes.
I get in the way when I'm reading a lot of fiction or even watching shows where I'm like, I don't like the position that these characters got put in. I'm gonna watch something else, and then I will never go back to it again.
Yep, yep. If I'm done, I'm done.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, absolutely. So, and I loved your book as well. Took into account that people with neurodivergence might be reading it.
Yeah,
And
that was really
so
important to me.
it was spaced out in a way that it made it very easy to read. Let me just say, I'm a good
I've
reader
gotten
anyway, but no big walls of text was very good.
Mhm.
It was very
I got
helpful.
a lot of comments back and a lot of people saying I have a hard time sitting down reading a book. I flew through yours, and that
Mm-hmm.
made me feel wonderful because I want people to feel joy when they read these stories, when they take them in. I don't want you to feel bogged down with a
Mm.
wall of text, as you put. It is one of those things that is, I will literally start to nod off. It
Yeah.
is so difficult sometimes.
Yeah. And I think as well, like I read your book in 2 days and it was on my phone, so that made it also easy because I always have my phone on me.
Hmm.
But the short stories as well, I knew that I could just sit down and read one short story and then get up and do what I had to do. And
Exactly.
that made it easy. There was a very clear stopping point, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And in comparison, I'm reading another book at the moment and not liking it, which is a wall of text. And it's if anyone's ever listened, and this is, I will make an actual review. I'm going to try and finish the book. I don't know if I will. Women Who Run with the Wolves.
I've heard of that one.
I've heard so many people talk about it. I was like, fine, I'll go read it just so I can, because everyone's like, oh, have you read it? Or should I read it? And I'm like, I'll go read it myself first. And within the first chapter, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna like this.
Mm.
It's a lot of prose
Hmm.
without saying much. It's a lot of words to say, not very much. And
Ah, it's giving me once and future king energy.
it's just very wordy.
Hmm.
And now I'm like 3 chapters in, and it's no better. The only good
Oh,
part is they're talking about stories. So they've done a retelling of Bluebeard, and I love that story. And so I'm like, oh, I enjoyed this bit. But then when they pulled it apart afterwards and talked about Bluebeard, I was like, oh no, I don't like what the actual author's saying.
yeah.
And the fact, because they keep talking about how the wild woman is an archetype. But one thing, I'm going to read this out because you're going to laugh. I laughed. Did I read? I wrote it somewhere. Anyway, they refer to the woman, the wild woman who lives in the out of the way pelvis, and that we need to appeal to them when we lose things. And I'm like, sitting there going, whispers to pelvis, excuse me, ma'am, are you in there? Like, what did I just read?
Lives in the out of the way pelvis.
Yes. And it was written like out dash of dash the dash way pelvis. And I'm like, is this a place? Is this literally my pelvis? Are you saying that the wild woman lives inside my pelvis? I'm very confused.
I'm very
It
confused.
was very strange. And there's a lot of weird gender. I mean, it was written a while ago, so I have to give
Yeah.
it that aspect. But there was a lot of stuff saying that women's life energy is in their eggs, and that for men it is in their furry little pocket or the cojones. And I was like, what am I reading?
Wait. So the furry little pocket and the cojones are the same? Because I was
I
going to think that
so
those were two different things.
think so is what they're referring to. They were like, oh, if you're
Okay.
another gender and you're reading this book, this is what where your life energy is. I'm like, oh, this is where nuance comes in. And
Uh-huh.
there is no nuance. It's like, this is where it is. I'm like, what about people like my niece who was born with no ovaries? Like, does she have no life energy? What?
None.
You know, like,
None. None at all.
oh, those. So yes, it feels like a book I'm not gonna yeah, I've already made my decision, but I will still keep trying just to give a thorough review on that. But it'll probably
Totally.
be a very critical one. So that's probably not, that's why I was like, and I'm just going to read Marshall's book instead. I'll just put that aside.
Just put it aside. Put it aside.
This one's way better. And yeah, it was really fun. I really, really enjoyed. I'm going to go back and read all of those short stories again. And I just think they're filled with magic. There's not like, they're vague enough to give you so much room to
Mm-hmm.
imagine them out. It just felt, yeah, just like an old fairy tale, right?
Yeah. And it was
Love
really
it.
cool because some of them, they are teaching historical acts of magic, things that we know. There's one
Mm-hmm.
called Witch Bottles that
Yes.
teaches the two different types of like witch bottles that were
Mm-hmm.
used in Europe, specifically mostly the UK, and then over again through traveling into America, we found a bunch like
Yeah.
hidden under old homes when they dig them up
In
for
the
renovations.
chimney, behind the
Yeah, up the
bricks.
chimney.
Yeah.
And there was two different types. And a lot of times you only hear about this one, you only hear about this one. And there were actually ones that were more protective and ones that were actually meant to send back malefic magic sent your way. And I wanted to create a story that could deliver that information to modern practitioners in a way that
Mm.
could be applicable now, today.
Yeah. Well, you've done really well. And I love that you've called it, you know, you use the word cunning quite a lot in there. And
I do.
I think you've been really cunning in the way that you have woven your own words together and the magic that's within them and the wisdom that's within them. I think it's very, very well done. So
Well, thank you.
thank you.
I did use that word a lot, and you'll notice it. I'm not sure if someone did this as a subtweet situation, being like, some people don't know what the word cunning means. And I'm like, I'm not sure you're talking about me. But I do think that it is that word alone has taken on a larger than life energy when it comes to our specific community, when it comes to cunning man, cunning woman, cunning folk.
Mm,
It it doesn't necessarily always mean exactly what the original definition from the dictionary meant because it's taken on an etymology that has been attributed to people, that has been owned by people. And
mm,
especially when it comes down to the fact that to do this work, you have to be cunning. You have to be
mm-hmm,
clever. You have to a lot of times read between the lines. And even if you find that that may be difficult, you have to find a way to adapt to a lot of your situations. This book really kind of delivers information in a way that you could read this as a simple story and tell it to someone. You could read this to all the stories except for probably one of them to a child.
mm. I was actually
And you could,
thinking that. I was like,
yeah,
could I read this to
you
my
could read,
6 year old? But there was the flight one. I was like,
yeah, the
no,
first
not
flight
this one.
one. That one's for adults. But even then, that parable of what was going on that was definitely more adult had a
Mm,
very specific purpose. And it was that teaching about the transgressive nature of what it meant to be a witch and what people
mm-hmm,
thought it meant to be a witch. Um, all of these things are delivered in a way that, like I said, could be read to a child as a story, but someone with a cunning eye could see this is teaching me something. Oh, this is a great idea. Oh,
mm-hmm,
wow. So I could mix this up together. I bet you if I read this while lighting a candle and saying that, and not even I bet you, because in the back, I connect all of the actual
yeah.
grimoire work and spells back to the stories, back to these
Mm,
characters, what might have been in their personal books of magic.
mm. No, I think it's wonderful. And what I've noticed with you, even just through your content and everything, words for you are very, are you, what's your big three?
Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Gemini.
Okay. Gemini, I mean, words there as well. And same
Mhm.
with Sagittarius in a way. There's that teaching, that high level teaching, and that bringing it down to knowledge that everyone can understand that would be in those big three. Uh, but with your content and even through this book, words seem to be just this like real magical focal point. They're very well thought out, they are very purposeful. Every word is said, and even just the fact that you have an amazing reading voice. Please tell me you're doing the audiobook for this.
I will be.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah.
Because it takes you to another place. That's what I've always loved about your content is you're like, I know it's you as soon as I hear your voice, and it sort of drops down and it gets all like a little bit breathy, but like in a really magical way, and not a like sensual way. If you know, there's like a
Well, thank
difference.
you. And um, ASMR is kind of one of those funny things that I think has also taken a life on its own. And I'm not a huge fan of the whisperies and scratching microphone and nails on anything, but
Yep.
I do think there is a level of, I think that there's a level of listening that I think reaches people on an emotional and nostalgic level.
Mm.
And I think that there are certain voices that just absolutely hit me that way. And I wanted to try to create that. That's what I feel when I work this, when I talk about this, when I wrote these stories, I felt a deep sense of nostalgia, of magic, of dark fairy tale, as you described.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure that when I deliver my work, when I deliver my content, when I'm sharing something, I want you to feel that same way too, because witchcraft is so much more than words on paper. It's so much more than spells and herbs
Mm.
and deities and the internet. It's such an intense feeling. And I think that I've read a lot of witchcraft books that had a lot of information and no feeling. I felt like I was getting an absolute absence of humanity behind it.
Mm.
And I wanted to make sure that you felt like you were cuddling up by the fire and your grandmother was telling you a story while knitting or like crocheting. Like there is that, like you can smell the
Mm.
the the fireplace. You can smell the hot cocoa. You can feel that sense of comfort and hominess while you read these stories and
Mm.
listen to them and get that emotional punch. Some of them do have quite an emotional punch in the gut, and some
Yeah.
of them are meant to make you feel something a little uncomfortable, and some of them are meant to make you feel something a little bit elated and sexual. And you have all of these feelings and emotions, and witchcraft is not devoid of those.
Mm.
So I was important to me and how I deliver them, how I speak, especially in my content and hopefully in my book. I
Yeah.
want that feeling to be very, very present.
Yeah, absolutely it was. I can definitely say that. It had a vibe of like the Silver Bullet and the other witch folky
Yes.
stories. Had that
Love the silver
vibe.
bullet.
Had the vibe without being like against witches. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Because I find those folk tales and those, for anyone listening, they're southern kind of like Appalachian folk stories that have this sort of same vibe, except they're very much like witches are bad, witches are evil throughout
Hmm.
all of them, and witches are all in league with the devil. Whereas yours didn't have that. It was more, this is power, this is either saving someone's life or opening the way for them or giving them their power back. Right. So
Well, it
it
was a different
was,
perspective.
yeah.
It was being told from the perspective of the witch in the fairy tale is not always the bad guy. And
Mm-hmm.
instead, it gives you the perspective sometimes from the witch, sometimes from the person experiencing that access to power for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like we always got fairy tales from the outside perspective of why the witch is bad, how to trick the witch, how to get
Yeah.
what you want from the witch and walk away still alive. I think that there can be a place for that, even in what I'm writing,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it comes across as I don't think it always has to be quite as
No.
dire. And I think that there's so much more to the like when you think of stories of Baba Yaga, you have some stories where she's eating children and some stories
Yep.
where she's like, "You're clever. I like you. I'm going to teach you something." And you never know which direction it's going to go.
I think I'm actually chatting with Madame Pomita next week. So
Oh my gosh,
everyone,
yes, please.
everyone
Tell her I said
listening,
hello.
that one will be coming out later on. But with her book, that was another aspect, the folk story throughout it around Baba Yaga
Hmm.
and the story. I love that. That's what I love in terms of a book and learning, because you, as I said, learning through story is such a powerful way to do that. And you've got that same aspect. That's probably why these two books I loved so much and have asked both of you on to the podcast, because I was like, you know, the storytelling aspect of it is really, really beautiful. So thank you for putting your work out into the world. Before we jump off, what
Hmm.
is, I guess, what is your one piece of advice that you would give to anyone who is I don't want to say reading your book, because not everyone's going to have access straight away as well. Maybe
Hmm.
to everyone who wants to incorporate more stories in their witchcraft.
Hmm. I'd like you to think as a practitioner, especially if you're new, it doesn't matter if you're new or adept. I want you to think about something that is prevalent in your life. It could be as simple as the tree at the corner of your house that's been there a long time. It could be a piece of art you've had in your home, or maybe a piece of art that you've walked by at your work for years and never really noticed. I want you to take a second and actually give it a little bit more attention. Um, there's a picture behind me you can see here. that I drew when I was much younger and then recreated it digitally. And I call it The Lady Who Watches. It was a simple piece, it was literally a simple ad in a magazine, and I drew it in an art class. And I built this story around her, and it happened over time. My mom, my mom. No, you don't know my mom. Oh my gosh, moms. They, she framed my picture and hung it up, and she became the lady who watched my family. She watched
Mm,
over my childhood. She watched over me growing up. She watched over me coming home being bullied. She watched over me coming out. She watched over me moving out. She watched over my sister as for 3 more years. She watched over her as she moved out, and then my parents. She watched over my parents' divorce. She watched over their new home. She watched over
mm,
all these things. And ultimately, she's become a figure in our house, in my home, because now that I've digitized it, I've got one for my sister. I've sent one to my mom. I've sent one to my best friend, Kevin, and I have one in my house. And I think a lot of you out there as practitioners can look at pieces of art, statues, things that maybe have been passed down in your family. Maybe you just found it at a thrift store, and you can actually take some time to think about it. This painting, who is this character? What is their backstory? Do they have any ideas? Are they good or bad? Are they a little bit in between? Are they oppressed? Are they privileged? I think if many of us started asking ourselves, what are the stories of these people in paintings that we pass by every day? What is the story of this tree? It's an oak. What type of oak? What area of the United States, if you're in the United States, does it come from? What area of the world? What is the name? Like, who gave it this scientific name? We have the means at our fingertips to look these things up and research them. There are stories and things that exist that you don't know yet. And I
mm.
think if we took more time to think about that, I'm a huge believer in romanticizing your life. I think we should do that. I think we should do it all the time when we can. And I think if we do that to the things in our spirits of our home, the spirits of the trees in our yard, the spirits of the crepe myrtles, the spirits of our furniture, the spirits of our car, if we started thinking about them as living, breathing spirits with stories, with ideas,
Mm.
you'll never feel alone, and you will start to connect to the world around you on such a deeper level. And I guarantee you, you will find that there are creative stories coming at you right and left because you've opened yourself up to them.
I love that. It's something I think I do naturally as well. So it's probably why I was always drawn to your content and everything. But fantastic advice. You might see behind me, there's an emu on the wall. Can you see that?
Yes.
The orange emu. I painted that. I love painting emus. And I called her Karen because it looks like she's just sort of poked her head in, like, what's going on in here? What's she's like keeping watch, but in a very like,
Yeah. Do you live in this neighborhood?
yes. Are you supposed to be? Do you have the password to that? Like, she's watching over my sacred space, right?
Yeah.
She's the Karen that's like, looking out for me. And then I've got, you can't see, there's a magpie here as well that I've painted. I'm going to show you as well. For people watching on YouTube, this is Matilda.
That's beautiful.
Isn't she gorgeous? Matilda Magpie.
Wow.
She, and I always talk about it. I've got a YouTube video on art magic where I talk about creativity through art magic. But Matilda, because all of my paintings, they all have names.
Mhm.
Matilda is like the busy magpie mum. She's got a nest full of little birds chirping at it. She does not have time to deal with anyone's bullshit, right? But she's also got your eye. She's got her eye on you. So I've got these two watchful spirits at both ends of my sacred spaces where I do all of my magic, my workings, my literal work, podcasts, everything. And I've got them both opposite each other, just keeping an eye on everything, right? They're my watchful spirits.
Yeah.
I've given them stories. She's a busy mum of probably 5 little magpies chirping at her all the time. But she's got an eye for detail. Magpies will pick up on the tiniest little glimmer of anything.
Mhm.
Whereas my emu over here, emus can be pretty scary. They're pretty big, right?
I've
Pretty
been to an
big.
emu farm actually in Texas.
Yes.
They are interesting. And I've seen ostriches. It's a
Yeah.
night and day, but still.
Yeah. So they're very different. Whereas magpies are a little, they're smaller, but here they swoop people. So we have signs.
Oh,
There's
fun.
a crossing for the school right behind us, and there's a sign there saying, like, take an umbrella, wear a hat, because magpies will swoop you and they'll come and get you. I've never been swooped, and I think that's because I have I practice ornithomancy. I give a lot of offerings to the birds, that sort of thing. Um, but that's why I've sort of brought her in, because she's protective. She's a bit scary. She'll go after people. Whereas Emu is a little bit more like a sentinel in a way.
Hmm.
Like she's not, she might run after you or chase someone, but she's not really going to hurt anyone. They look scary.
Hmm.
They're really not. But she's going to tell me about it. She'll tell me about it.
I love that. I put bird feed out on my patio a lot, and I have a squirrel that comes. I've
Mhm.
named him Dentalion,
Oh,
and it's the funniest thing. He literally comes out, and if there's no food there, he'll literally wait. He will look through my blinds for me to put it out there, and it's very interesting. I know it seems silly, but like literally building a quote unquote building a relationship with this squirrel,
yep.
it's become part of my animistic practice. I gave him
Mhm.
a name, Dentalion. What does he like? He likes more peanuts. He likes cheese.
Yeah.
He's not a fan of this and that, but he likes the way that we can do this
Hmm.
with the world around us is so much more in our face. And
Mm.
sometimes we're so busy looking for the next book. We're so busy looking for the next influencer that we're forgetting like
Mm.
these things exist in our homes today. What about that lamp your grandmother passed down to you? What about those?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I have family from around the world, so I've had some wonderful little things passed down to me, and they carry with them a lot of time. A lot of hands have touched them,
Oh,
a lot
I
of
love
feelings
that.
and experience have had passed down through them. And I
Yeah.
think as practitioners, we can build our own stories. The information that's coming through is your UPG.
Hmm.
That's your personal gnosis. You're not going to get personal gnosis from any Witchcraft 101 book.
Yeah, definitely. So I know I bought your book on Amazon.
Mhm.
Is where else can you find it in stores? Is it in stores? Is it, because
It's not
self-publishing is
really,
slightly different, right?
yeah, I self-published through Amazon, so
Hmm.
that made it the most accessible around the world. So in general, if you want to purchase it, there is four different versions on Amazon available. There's the Kindle version, there's the standard color paperback, there's the hardcover, and there's the black and white book as well. And depending on where you are in the world, Amazon doesn't have a couple of them based off of certain
I'm
things.
wondering which one I got now. I had to send it to my husband to buy through his account because he's got Prime and I don't. So,
Of course, of course.
what
Um,
link did I send him? Did I get the? I hope I got the color one.
and Australia was funky. I don't know what was going on. That one was having a hard time with the press. I know us, Amazon.
Yeah, we get everything like either really late or not quite right. But let me see. How do you tell which is the difference when you're looking? Oh, black and white 5x8 edition. I think that was
That's the one.
the
Yeah,
only one that I
I
could
think
get.
Australia didn't have hardcover or um
Maybe
standard
paperback.
color. But if you are super anti-Amazon, I did self-publish it also through Ingram Spark catalog, so that makes it available on barnesandnoble.com, and it's
Oh,
the black and
awesome.
white version. It is the black and white version. If it's through Ingram Spark, it's the black and white version. If you are an occult shop owner and you want to carry my book, you can by ordering it
Mhm.
from the Ingram Spark catalog.
Awesome. I know one shop that I think would really.
Well, if you want to talk to them about carrying my book, I mean, that'd be super cool.
I
Super
will. I'm
cool.
going to be presenting a class there next month, so I will absolutely, because it's right. It's right up their alley. I know what they're like, so
Oh,
I will
thank
mention
you.
it. Yes, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Where can people find you online if they want to follow along with you?
Please follow me. I am on Instagram and TikTok and Threads now. Oh, Threads. I know
Oh
I
yeah, we're
actually
going to
like
add
it.
that
It's
in
really
now.
fun. I know. At Witch of Southern Light. I am on Twitter at Marshall WSL, but I'm kind of moving out of there and over into Threads.
Me too. Me
I'm not
too.
happy with Twitter anymore.
Hmm.
If you'd like to read my blog, I haven't been as frequent with recently, but the Southern Light Diaries on Patheos Pagan. If you want to buy my witchy wares on my Etsy shop, you can purchase a PDF for Grimoire pages. These are actual spells from my book that I have digitally put together in a beautiful printable Grimoire page. Cut it up, make it smaller, paste it in your own personal magical record keeping. And I also have a lot of my art, some art from my book, some art inspired my book, and some art that came before my book on my Redbubble shop. So lots of
Wonderful.
merchandise on lots of stuff. All of these links can be found in the link tree in every one of my bios. So
Awesome.
that'll give
Maybe
you everything.
I'll copy your Linktree link and put
That would
it
be
in
the
the
easiest thing
description.
ever.
There we go. Why have
There
I
we
not done
go.
that for anyone else before? That is a really good idea.
And for people, go check out that link tree. Even if you're already following me, you haven't taken a look. I have like
There's a
tons of free
million.
resources. Yes, I have tons of free resources. You can look up planetary correspondences, days of the week, herbal
Mm,
correspondences, how to make herbal tinctures, how to make extractions, like lots of different free resources for any
awesome.
practitioner you want.
That's so good. That's so helpful. Thank you so, so, so much for joining us today and sharing your words, sharing your wisdom, sharing your light with all of us. That's been really, really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to hear it.
Yay. Oh, I could just listen to Marshall all day. His voice gives me goosebumps. It is phenomenally beautiful. And that's probably why he also has a podcast. So definitely check out his content. Absolutely highly recommend his book and love everything about Marshall. Now, if you guys are on Spotify, then you're going to want to leave me a 5-star rating because we are coming up to the 2-year anniversary of the Witch Talks podcast, and I'm hoping to have 55-star ratings on Spotify by that time, which is September 1st. So you have 2 weeks to rate it on Spotify, guys. And if you're over on Apple iTunes, I don't have an Apple. I'm an Android girl, so I don't actually know where it's up to on Apple. So feel free to send me a screenshot. But you can rate it over there and you can leave me a beautiful comment over there as well. A little review would absolutely make my day. So have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world today. I am enjoying Melbourne, probably flying back home on the day this podcast goes to air, and I will chat to you next time.